Hey guys, I was on the media tour, and this video is going to be a breakdown of all of the tank changes coming in Dawntrail. Timestamps will be available for each of the tanks. General tank changes are that all the tanks are going to be getting a Rampart buff, where Rampart now boosts healing recovery via healing actions by 15% for themselves. Meaning that a Scholar could, say, deploy a crit low barrier to get it even bigger from using Rampart, but I mean, realistically, all healers are going to benefit a lot from this, including Warrior. Second general tank change is that Reprisal is now going to be 15 seconds duration, which is getting it a lot longer, which is going to be nice. So the first tank I'm going to be talking about is the Gunbreaker. The first change for the Gunbreaker is now that their No Mercy buff lasts 20 seconds, and that it gives them a buff called Ready to Break, which lets them cast the Sonic Break ability, which they already have. It's a small change, but worth mentioning that now that's where Sonic Break has been packed into. Gunbreaker's current mobility ability is having its damage component removed. You're going to notice this consistent across most of the tanks. Looking at you, Warrior. And now their mobility ability for the Gunbreaker has been renamed to be called Trajectory and is functionally the same as before without the damage. Gunbreaker's Bloodfest ability will now grant the buff Ready to Rain, which allows them to use the ability Rain of Beasts, which is going to be the Gunbreaker's big capstone of the expansion, and it's just a straight up on GCD weapon skill that does a massive 800 potency burst of damage. Lastly, Gunbreaker is going to get an upgrade to their defensive Nebula skill, where it mitigates a total of 40% damage, which is going to be consistent across these tanks. It's all going to get a buff to 40%, and then Gunbreaker's also going to, with their great Nebula skill, get a larger HP pool to really pad incoming damage. So one thing you're going to notice consistently is all tanks are going to get their 30% upgrade to 40%, and that they're going to get some kind of defensive benefit. So this is just a nice kind of like slight defensive boost to their heavy mitigation button. Next up is Paladin, and from here I'm going to be cutting the explanations of concepts we covered before short. So first up is that Paladin's personal buff, Fight or Flight, grants you the Goring Blade Ready ability, where you can just execute on the global cooldown burst skill Goring Blade for 700 potency. Paladin's big personal mitigation is getting upgraded to be called Guardian. 40% damage reduction gives them a barrier on top of their health equal to 1000 healing potency. Paladin's Requiescat is going to be getting an upgrade to be called Imperator. When you cast Imperator, it's going to change to allow you to execute an ability called Blade of Honor, which is going to be a 25 Yalm range, 700 potency burst of AoE damage. Now, for Paladin, you still, when you press Imperator, go into the Confederator state where you can then use Blade of Faith, Truth, finally Blade of Valor, which is totally separate from Blade of Honor on its hotkey, but in order, and I say hotkey there, but in order to get the effect of being Blade of Honor ready, you also need to execute Blade of Valor via the trait Enhanced Blade of Valor. Paladin, currently in Endwalker, has the 3 Atonement spam that you kind of spam Atonement back to back to back, and the developers have expanded the Atonement skill line to now start with Atonement and then move into Supplication and then finally move into Sepulchre, which they are functionally the same, but it is going to definitely add animation flair to the Paladin, where it no longer looks like Atonement spam, which is kind of funny. My Paladin thoughts for Dawntrail is similar to the Gunbreaker, that this looks like a healthy evolution of the job that if you played and enjoyed Paladin already, you are going to continue to enjoy it into Dawntrail. And I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing. I think that it's good if you already like something and it's not getting like a massive overhaul. Third up is going to be the Dark Knight, and the first big change is that Blood Weapon buff will now be merged with Delirium, which means that the one button will now give you 3 stacks of Blood Weapon buff, which restores MP and gives you blood gauge per weapon skill landed, but will also give you 3 stacks of Delirium, which allows you to execute the new Delirium skills, which, to be quite clear, is still really the same idea as spamming Blood Spiller or Quietus, but with new effects. Now, instead of just spamming freaking tons of Blood Spiller, now it's going to be a different animation set combination from Scarlet Delirium to Comeuppance to Tor Cleaver. Impalement is now simply the AoE upgrade for Quietus from the system. Salted Earth will now be a continuation skill after placing down the Salted Earth AoE. Dark Knight's mobility ability has had its damage component removed similar to Paladin and has been renamed as Shadowstride. Dark Knight's 40% mitigation skill upgrade is called Shadowed Vigil, and gives them an excogitation-like effect where if their HP falls below a certain threshold, they're going to get a big boost of healing to bring them back up. I just realized that I said excog, which is a Scholar skill in a tank video. I'm so sorry. The Scholar name just left out. And last, but definitely for me at least not the least, is the Warrior, which I am keenly interested in, as for whatever reason it just is the tank that I gravitate towards ever since Heaven's Sword. And so Warrior is getting an upgrade to their Vengeance skill to now be called Damnation, which is... that's intense. It still returns some damage when you take damage to enemies, which I always wish we saw more of that kind of effect because it's fun to me. But now, Damnation, what a name, will give you one of the biggest heal over time effects in the game of, and it's called Primeval Impulse, which also heals for 400 potency every 3 seconds because that's server ticks, and over 15 seconds that is going to be a total potency of 2000 healing, which is freaking awesome and definitely keeps Warrior as being the green tank of the game, or what do you call it, tank healer of the game? Whatever the beam is. Sorry, I'm trying to do this way too early in the morning. My brain can't even. Primal Ruination is a new weapon skill that follows the ability Primal Rend, and it does AoE damage for 740 potency to the main target and is totally badass. Ultimately, it's just like Primal Rend follow-up, but badass. Primal WRATH is an ability, and so that means off the GCD, and it's going to be a burst of 600 potency. And this ability, this Primal WRATH, is going to follow Inner Release, but has some requirements. So Inner Release does a lot of awesome things, as always. It's like very a lot of things. But now, when you land Fell Cleave, the most iconic tank skill in the game by far, or the AoE skill Decimate, which is less iconic than Fell Cleave spam, you are now going to be getting 1 stack of what is called Burgeoning Fury buff, and when you land 3 of these skills, either Fell Cleave or Decimate spenders, you are going to be getting Burgeoning Fury, and then you will get the Wrathful buff, which will allow you to execute, with the Wrathful buff, the Primal WRATH off GCD ability. For Warrior, and again, I do want to say that this is media tour stuff and things could change before Dawntrail's full release, but their mobility ability Onslaught uniquely does still retain its damage component. Whether that's because it has 3 charges and intentional or not remains to be seen until we see the final Dawntrail and actually get Dawntrail in our hands, but I think that that is neat, and for one, I don't complain about that. So my thoughts on the Warrior changes really does fall in line with the other tanks. I'm going to be honest, this is kind of like Warrior and all the tanks. I should maybe put that there. But if you enjoyed your Warrior before, you're going to continue to enjoy it into Dawntrail. There's nothing here that really shakes the boat for any of the tanks. And more than anything, I would just call it a general evolution of their current kits with some interesting new additions, and their current skills that we already pressed are doing a bit more, like Vengeance upgrade to Damnation, which is like a wild name, but that's for Warrior, and it has an awesome heal over time effect component added to it that I think is really cool. But fundamentally, it's still your big mitigation button, and it always was. For me, myself, I'm feeling pretty comfortable with the state of tanks going forward into Dawntrail. I can definitely see myself continuing, at least for me, and again, everyone has their preferred tank, but for me personally, I can see myself continuing to take Warrior into content as my preferred tank and loving the absolute heck out of it. I think its additions are pretty neat, and I know that I will continue to love my Warrior very much, and the other tanks are super cool too, but for me, Warrior is just my preferred tank, and so yeah. But with that, we're at the end of this tank video, so let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and until next time, I need to get to editing that other video really quick. See you.